All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Sports Life Network Soccer Report. This is going to be a different type of video. We're going to be previewing the Liga Nos, the Primeira Liga, the Portuguese league. And for this episode, I got a newcomer, Seth. We have Nick.
What's up?
And we have a very special guest from the Talking to the Doll Benfica podcast. We have Alfredo Fumacas. How we doing, Alfredo?
Oh man, special. I wouldn't use that word to describe me, but yeah, that's fine. Thank you for having me, man.
No problem. All right, guys. So my idea is we're just going to move from the bottom of the table all the way to the top. So that makes our first team. And unfortunately, we have Deportivas des Aves down at the bottom with 13 points. What do we got for them?
Yeah. They've been struggling all season, find themselves at the 13-point mark with 10 rounds to go. It doesn't look like they're gonna get to that 30-point mark. So they're struggling. So they're definitely one of the candidates to go down.
Yeah, looking through their schedule, they still got to play. So they still got to play Port, Braga, and Benfica. So it's not an easy way up.
No, that's for
Not
sure.
looking good.
And with the tight fixture list, I think especially considering how thick and fast, and players aren't going to be up to speed as they come back into it. Not fully match fit. They're definitely going to struggle overall.
Yeah, they've had problems with their fans too. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Socios they didn't show up to a few games. They protested against the ownership or something, I believe. So this is off the top of my head right now, but a rough year for Aves.
Yeah, I mean when you finish the season like you did last season, and then this season you're dead last without showing any signs. Certainly, there's always going to be some asks from the fans or some answers to be given by the team, not only by the team but also from the club. I mean, how could we be so good in 1 year and then the next year we're absolutely dead last?
Yep, it's unfortunate because I do love seeing the Aves fans. I forgot their name. I don't know. I just blanked on their name, but their ultras group is one of my favorites to watch. Every time I look through the highlights for these games, they always are the ones I like to see. But maybe next year they can rebuild fast, and maybe in a few years we can see them back up in the top.
Yeah, I think that after them going to the Portuguese Cup, which is how they stamped their place in European competition, or they were supposed to go to European competition. After stamping that, certainly the fans expected more.
Right. All right, now moving up, we have in 17th place Portimonense with 16 points. So the bottom two right now, the two looking to be looking most likely to be relegated, is the same two that got promoted a few years back together. So
yeah.
So Portimonense down at 16th place. It's just been it's just another rough year for another smaller club.
Yeah, it hasn't been a good year for Portimonense. I mean, the Paços Ferreira, who was the first team above the better team than Portimonense. If you recall, Portimonense had a couple guys. There were a couple skilled Brazilian guys last year that were very good. They also, I think they still do, have Jackson Martinez. But again, Jackson Martinez at this point is not a Jackson Martinez that at a peak of his form. He's on his way down, actually. But usually they do pretty well. But this year, they just hasn't been good.
Yeah, they've only scored 16 goals in the league this season, and they've conceded more than twice that. So I mean, again, you mentioned Jackson Martinez, and that's a player who you'd expect to make the impact. But I don't think since he left the league he hasn't been the same player. So you're looking for somebody to kind of step up and put it all on their shoulders, but they just kind of lack that key man right now, I think.
I think that happens all too often when a small team takes a chance on a striker who's, in the sort of twilight of their career, definitely on the way down. They take a chance and they might pay, higher wages to that player more to keep them up. It doesn't always work out, and you're stuck with a player who's on probably big enough wages to, do serious financial damage to these clubs, and they're not scoring the goals. They might be getting injured or whatever it is, but you're taking in a striker for the name who isn't the Jackson Martinez who is lighting it up for Porto, was in talks to, go to a great team in Europe, went to Atletico Madrid, didn't work out. When you see that sort of career path happen, you feel sorry for these teams because the striker that they know the name of that's left the league and come back is not the player they know. It's not getting that athletic, fast, excellent finisher that he was before. They're getting the sort of run down that they're going to be in trouble regardless of who the name is at the top of the team sheet. And I'm not sure about his appearances this season, but it can't be anything special.
Yeah, and a big player that they sold recently was Nakajima to Port.
Nakajima, I was just about to mention him.
Yeah, he was the guy when he played for Portuguese. He was the guy who did everything for him pretty much. So when they lost him, they lost their heart of the team pretty much.
Yeah, he was definitely sorry.
And scored a lot, and then of course, the big three come knocking, and you can't deny these offers to a player like Nakajima. But then that's the heart and soul of your team and the best player by far in your squad that you're losing, and there's not really anything you can do about that.
Yeah, they have one other player that's a standout player. That's Bruno Tabata, a Brazilian. That he plays in creative midfield. He's been outstanding, but without having that support and without having that spark that Nakajima provided them last year, they find themselves in a difficult situation here.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear that name being called out for transfers for one of the big three. It's only expected at this point. But all right, moving out of the relegation zone. In 16th place, we have Paços de Ferreira with 22 points. They're really holding on for dear life right now.
Yeah. No, Paços Ferreira, in the past few years, they've always been a team that's been right around middle to up, the upper part of the table. They had some good coaches that went there. Rui Vitória, Fonseca was there also. So they've had their good shares of coaches, and they had a nice little team. But this year they just find themselves at the bottom. I wouldn't say that they're in danger of being relegated, but at this point, if you're going into these last 10 games, you want to secure your stay in the first division as soon as possible.
Yeah, quickly looking at their schedule, the three standout games is against Sporting, Port, and Braga. Other than that, they have either midfield or even Rio Ave. Never mind. Yeah, I forgot. So Rio Ave is there too. So they can afford to lose, I think, one game, pretty much 3 points. But if I'm them, I at least try and get draws out of those, and you got to win the other ones just to keep stay up.
Yeah, I think as we get into the running, because they have off, so there's only like a 3-point gap between the two, and so, you mentioned they're not necessarily in danger of really just going down and really struggling, but I think that game against Ops is going to be a must-win, especially as they get into it. And their defense hasn't been particularly fantastic. They've shipped 34. I think if over the next the next couple of games, they can try and focus on firming that up. At least just firming up the defense in those last 10 games, I think is really going to be the drive to keep them up.
All right, moving up the table, we have in 15th place Maritimo. We're going over to the Madeira Island here with 24 points. Now Maritimo, so they actually got their stadium allowed to play games, so that means that the teams had to fly over there, and there was some controversy about having the referees fly with players over there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the National Health Authority in Portugal, or the DGS, put forth very strict guidelines in terms of the preparation for the games, the travel arrangements, even staying at hotels before the games, even during the games, as you could imagine. So there was a big thing is like, oh, well, the refs are going to be traveling to on a same plane as the teams, and this specifically to Porto and Benfica, obviously, because there's such a tight race. But the biggest thing was like, well, what's preventing any of the directors or any of the technical staff to go up a couple seats in a plane and give the referee an earful for a call that they didn't like? But come on, come on, we're professionals, and well, no, we're professionals. They're professionals. But I mean, this is something that's a little bit far-fetched, in my opinion. I'm sure that there will be guys from the league, representatives from the league, that would be watching out for any harassment of the referees if they're traveling together, especially after the game.
And you can, if this happens, you already know that Porto get away with a 90th minute penalty, the Benfica fans will be talking. If Benfica get away with a 90th minute penalty, the Porto fans will be talking. It's just typical Portuguese league stuff that's gonna happen. I already know.
Yeah. But go ahead. Sorry.
A question. What sanctions would end up being put in place, or what kind of penalties would a club incur if they were, let's say, abusing referee on the plane, like you say? Like what is the consequence for that?
Well, I think I'm not sure the consequence may be about 70 euros and 35 cents, because the fine amounts in Portugal are very odd, and it's often laughable. Yeah. But I think it would be something similar to if you were to go to the referee's locker room after the game is over. You go and knock on his door and ask questions, or ask for some kind of justification on some bad calls. I think that the same rule would apply there. I'm not aware of what kind of penalties are involved, though.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the typical banter between Porto and Benfica to happen when something like that happens. I have it written down somewhere. I'll put money on it too.
Yeah, a curious thing about Marítimo was that when FIFA approved the 5 substitution rule, and the Portuguese league decided to adopt it, but because they need to have a general assembly in order to officially adopt it, or to put it into the rules for this year, and that general assembly doesn't happen until the 8th of June, so after the league has started. Supposedly there was the president of the league was looking for some kind of gentleman's agreement between all the teams that just because the rule is not into effect, let's all honor this rule. And the Marítimo president was the first one to come out and said, I'm not gonna abide by that. So he kind of threw a monkey wrench, and he's a bit of a controversial figure also in Portuguese football.
Ooh, yeah, apparently he wants fans in the stadiums at one point.
Yeah,
that's another thing.
Probably it's just, I mean, it's just one of those things where they're looking for any little advantage they can get, and they're not thinking for the good of the overall league and stuff, because once the clubs kind of get lost in mid table, they want any chance that they can get to start climbing up the table, and I think that those little things that he thinks would give him the advantage, maybe like just his better fitness of his players, and he thinks that having 3 substitutions will aid him and harm other teams.
Yeah, I mean, he's also the type of guy that always wants to go against what everybody else is doing. So, this is often joked about, and this is kind of a cultural thing, because Madeira is an island and has their own ruler or the guy that's in charge of the island. Sometimes they look at it as being separate from the rest of the continent. So some of the ideologies and some of the attitudes that are taken are of one of exclusivity, because we're in an island and you're the continent, and you don't tell us what to do because we're on our own here. We've been on our own for the longest time.
And I guess they think they gave Portugal their trophy with Ronaldo too. So
yeah,
they got some leverage on them.
We all know that was Adair. That was Adair in the final who.
All right, moving up on the table, we have the escape artist Tondela with 25 points. Now, these guys are usually at the bottom of the table almost every year, except for, I think, was it last year they were actually in a decent spot. But they're usually down at the bottom, and they always find a way to stay up. It's amazing.
I was looking through their squad, and, I could not recognize a single name. There wasn't any, high-profile loans. A lot of, players in their later 20s. There's no, I see in a lot of these smaller teams in the Portuguese league, there's players who are around between the ages of 19 and 23 who are from the top 5-ish teams in Portugal and are loaned to these teams to help them survive. And this Tondela team, I was looking through their team and I could not find a reason as to why they would be above these other teams that actually have these loanees who are supposedly there to, develop as players and help their team. I looked through their squad and I couldn't find a single player like that. Whereas in Maritimo, I was looking through and they had quite a few foreign players. They had Maeda from Japan and Gederson from Brazil, who are names I'd recognized. But Tondela, I don't know.
You missed one, Seth. João Pedro, who played for the LA Galaxy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I agree with what you said. And a lot of these clubs live off of the fringe players from the top teams, because when they go to these clubs, they're bringing a level of talent, and most of the time the parent club is supporting their salaries. So a lot of these clubs live on these loanees. Yeah. Which also benefits the parent club, right? Because now the players are getting reps, they're getting the experience without the pressure of playing under the big lights or the big stadiums as Benfica or Porto or Sporting.
Definitely. I think I see that a lot with bigger teams that might not be consistently in a Champions League or Europa League spot. They'll have these promising young players where they don't necessarily need the squad depth, and it's more beneficial for them to go out on loan. So, some of the most promising players for these bigger European clubs in the top 5 leagues, they end up at Portuguese league teams or second division Germans or in the Serie A, because those teams can offer the experience for these young people to travel and to gain experience as professionals, where playing at an under 23 level in a top 5 league isn't really beneficial to them because it's not the speed of the game that they're going to be expected to play at once they're reaching that level of maturity. So I think it's pretty incredible what these top 4-ish Portuguese league teams are able to do, helping their own league. That's something you don't really see. It's pretty competitive and almost cannibalistic in the top 5 leagues of Europe, because they don't want to loan their players to lower teams in their same league because it can compromise their table position. Whereas I don't think Porto and Benfica and Sporting ever have to worry about that. I mean, they consistently find their way to the back to the top of the table, even when disaster strikes at Sporting, the players are attacked by the fans, they still end up back towards the top of the table. It's this miraculous recovery that occurs every single season.
Yeah, there's a huge disparity between, I would say, the first 3-4 teams to the rest of the league. But these guys, they play in the same championship, but their championship is actually a different one, right? And a lot of these guys, they aim to a middle half of the table, or even to not be relegated. But they got a tough start. Robert, I don't know if you were going to go into this, but they opened up with Benfica. Then they have Aves, which could be an easy 3 points for them at home, and then they go to Alvalade to play Sporting. So not a very easy schedule to start this or to restart this league.
Yep. But at least this year it looks like they won't have to claw their way up, because I don't know. I think it was the joke, because I listened to a lot of the Portuguese podcasts. It was the joke that Tondela was always down at the bottom, and then somehow last game they would score that last-minute goal and then they'd stay up.
Yeah, they would always find a way. That and beating Sporting.
Yeah, I was about to say that too. They always beat Sporting somehow.
And I think,
all right,
one of the dangers that they've got with this kind of the start that they have is that with these restarts, what we've seen, at least as far as Germany is concerned, is that it's really about how you hit the ground running. And if you don't start off, with getting the points on the board immediately, you're going to be way far on the back foot, because it really is like it is, like they had the whole summer break and they've got the season restarting. That's how it's going to feel for them. So I think that as soon as, if they drop a couple of points, and someone like Maritimo can pick up more points, you start to see them slip down the table. So they just need to be a little bit wary of how they start.
Yeah. Nick, I think you bring up a great point, because this restart could be a clean slate for a lot of them. And some of them might have been in a funk during the season and probably saw themselves being in that same position with this clean slate, and now coming back. There's some teams that are going to get galvanized, they're re-energized to finish up the rest of the season. And I think that this Tondela team is a team that will just try to get in there and make sure that they don't drop too much. But I think it's a team that has a decent coach and some quality players that they should be able to stay up.
And just one last point on Tondela. I just want to give a quick shout out to the guy, the one player I think he's the most loyal guy in Portugal, Claudio Ramos. He's been playing there his whole career, and he's 28 years old. He's the goalkeeper. He's never left. I just want to say he's a very loyal player. That's all. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, at one point he was considered to be the future of the national team, and I think that he's still getting call-ups as a third or fourth keeper, especially with what's his I forget his name, the one that's at Lyon.
Yeah, I think Beto.
Anthony Lopes.
Anthony Lopes deciding that he wasn't going to play internationally for because of personal reasons. Claudio Ramos was one of the guys that was in that set of 3-4 goalkeepers that were being called.
But all right, moving up the table, we have Belenenses SAD, or as I like to call him, Belenenses 2.0, with 26 points in 13th place. Now, for a team that's the second version, like pretty much, because this is a crazy story, but the team itself and the fans parted ways. So this version of Belenenses is the Socios version, I believe, something like that, right?
Well, what happened was, with the ushering of economical societies or club societies, what happened was the club split up. One into the financial part of it, which is run by the SAD, which is sporting societies, something like that, anonymous. So what happens is a lot of clubs now became twofold, right? One, the traditional club that was run by the club, and then you got the SAD, which is basically the financial angle of it that's run by administrators, and also control everything, every aspect, every economical aspect of the club. What happened was the club and the SAD didn't see eye to eye. So the club decided that they were going to split up with the SAD. The club was demoted the SAD stayed up. But the SAD, or this 2.0, as you mentioned, is not allowed to play in the stadium or their regular stadium because the club does not allow it. So what they've been doing is they've been playing at the Jamor, which is Portugal's national stadium, but it's been really bad. The conditions of the pitch have been really bad. I don't know if they're not paying to have the pitch taken care of, or if it's just an older pitch that only gets played on once or twice a year. But it's been bad. But Bulnes, actually, you look at some of the talent that they have. I mean, you're looking at Lica, Silvestre Varela, Marco Matias, all guys that have a lot of experience at big clubs. Especially Silvestre Varela, as you guys remember, he featured for Portugal in a Euro. Lica played for Porto, was a standout at Estoril. Porto picked him up, and then I think he ended up in Spain somewhere. But this is a team that has had some talent, but they just haven't been able to do anything.
And I was gonna say, like, for a team that it's not really the team, it's hard to explain, but like they're in a stadium that's not very good, not very good for weekly play. Like I love the Jamor for the Taça final, but that's it. So for a stadium that's usually empty every time they play in, or mostly empty, I should say, not completely, but mostly empty every time they play there. Them being in this mid-table position, it looks like they're safe from relegation. I'd say it's rather impressive, but they could. I can see them moving up a little bit more in the future.
Yeah, considering all the upheaval they've had with this club and SAD thing.
All right. Moving up, we have in 12th place, Vitória Setúbal with 28 points. Now, Setúbal is one of the quote-unquote bigger teams in Portugal. And
well, it depends what decade you look at.
Yeah, that's a good point. They are a team of history for the most part, and they sit in this mid-table position here, and they look like they could crack the 8th spot if things go their way. And they have a decent team. Like I'm not saying they're bad. They did draw to Benfica recently, so they got a good result there.
Yeah. No, they have Georgi Makaridze in goal, which is a guy that when he's on. And then you got a couple guys. You got Edilberto Pereira, who is a Benfica product that's been standout for them. You got Zequinha, which was a standout player for the I want to say U17 or U20
I think you're right. Yeah,
World Cup that happened in the US, if I'm not mistaken, US and Canada, if I'm not mistaken. So there's quite a couple guys here that are decent, and really they've done well to stay where they are.
I think the struggle for them this season really comes like in front of goal. None of their players have cracked more than like 3-4 goals this season. Top scorer is Carlinhos, and I think that what's probably going to hold them back is that lack of a true, consistent goal scorer. And they're only taking about 9.3 shots a game, and when you look at that, like that's not going to be enough to just really fire you up the table. I think that they have, there's quality there. They're lacks like just someone to push them forward.
Yep.
Right. In 11th place, we have Boa Vista, the other team from Port, and they are stuck in 11th place with 29 points. Now, Boa Vista, they cracked top 5 in attendance of the league this year. Since there's no fans coming anymore, they cracked top 5, which is to be expected. But at the same time, it's there. Like this team again, this team has a history. They won the league in 2002 or 2003.
It was 2000.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah, I'm off by a couple of years. That's when I was born. There you go.
Yeah, that was the year that Benfica came in 6th. The worst league performance in the club's history.
Yeah, Boa Vista, they have a good team, I'd say. But I feel like the one thing that really pushed them to win more games was their fans.
Yeah.
Because they would travel, and travel very good too. So I feel like they're losing something without the fans there.
Yeah, they got a bit of a cult following, right? So the other team in Porto is the city of Porto is obviously Porto, which brings out most of the fan base or the population of the city. But Boa Vista is kind of has gotten kind of a cult following from their fans, and there was a lot of heartbreak a few years ago when they were demoted as a result of that scandal that they had in Portugal with the golden whistle. But I mean, they have some players on here. Another example, Ricardo Costa, who's the guy that played at Porto. You have Mateus. You have Ethan Late, which is a goalie that Benfica is rumored to be interested in and possibly already locking in for next season. But they're a nice little team, and like I said, that cult following and the fact that they're able to pull that many fans, I think it's great for them. And they also have Heriberto Tavares, who is a Benfica product, which I believe is on loan over there or might be permanent. But yeah, they do have quite a few good players.
And just looking at their remaining schedule, it looks like they have a very hard one. They have Braga, second game back, and then 2 games later they got Port, which is a rivalry match, of course. And then 2 games later they have Benfica. And then the last 2 games they play Famalicão and Rio Ave. So
yeah, not good.
They got a good one coming up.
Yeah, but I think they at this point they probably have their position. I mean, they have 29 points. So I would think that with another 3 to 5 points, they should be able to lock in. Not that they should be worried, but I think at this point they'd be happy to finish where they are, +1, -1.
And the game I really want to see them win the most, not because I'm a Benfica fan, but I would love to see them beat Port, because it is a derby technically, but it's not really a derby because Port usually just end up winning every year.
Yeah.
I think because the app I'm on right now, it only goes down to 2014, and they haven't won a game since then. So
it's like the Merseyside derby then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, along those lines.
I actually noticed compared to the other teams below them, their goal difference is slightly better, but they've also just conceded so few goals. Only 23 goals conceded, but they've only scored 19 goals. And I was looking through their team, and they do not have a goal scorer with more than 3 goals. And I just I almost can't fathom how you can go 24 games without a single player scoring more than 3 goals. But even looking at the actual top scorers of this league, the top scorers don't have that many goals. So these teams relying on veteran defenders. I think the person you mentioned, I'm forgetting the name now, but he was 39 years old, turning 40, at the heart of their defense, playing every game for them. If he has experience in these upper level teams in this league, despite the fact that he's about to, go into his 4th decade as a person, that experience is invaluable, because if you're not scoring a lot of goals, you need someone like that to be able to lock up your defense. And if you're only conceding 23 goals from 24 games, I mean, that's incredible. That's something to
particularly in that mid-table area.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's going to keep you up. If you only have a person scoring 3 goals, your center forward scoring 3 goals, you need to have that if you want to stay up. And, they're looks like they're going to succeed in doing that if they can hit the ground running.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing that's interesting, right, is that they're good in midfield, and they have a new coach. He came in December, I believe, of last year.
Yeah, Daniel Ramos.
Yeah.
He came in for Lito Vidigal.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just it's amazing because, a manager change and all that, and they're still they're safe. They're safe from all that, but come to know Boa Vista, they're expecting to try and push for a Europa League spot. That's what they really want. So It doesn't look like they're going to be getting it this year, but they got to really because like Seth said, they have a really good defense. It's really the offense that needs some bolstering. So you'd hope that they'd get something to bolster that offense, and they can maybe push for the fourth place spot or even maybe third, but fourth place spot is what they really need to go for. All right, moving up the table in 10th place, we have the team that got promoted from the third division all the way up to the first division, Gil Vicente.
Yeah.
And yeah, the story goes that they were automatically relegated a few years back because of corruption. I forgot what it was. Was it buying players illegally?
It was something like that. I don't quite recall, but I remember some kind of illegality that they were accused of, and as a result, they dropped all the way down. And then there was this whole controversy because, okay, so what happens to the second division team that's supposed to be coming up, and now we got to give their place to Gil Vicente, which is it was a mess, but kind of typical for Portuguese football, if you ask me.
Absolutely. I'm just waiting for witch doctors to be brought into it.
Yeah, don't worry. Soon.
But a very good team. They started off this year on fire. They beat Porto in the first game. And from there, that was the biggest surprise I've had all season was seeing them beat Porto fair and square 2-1 too. So I was surprised to see that. And looking at their team, they got something good. Their coach is by far the thing that's really holding them together. Victor Oliveira. He's the guy who's usually in the second division and promotes a team. And then he'll leave that team and come back to a second division team and promote them. So it's good to see that he's being successful in the Primeira Liga. Yeah,
he's the promotion specialist. But when you look at this team, and there's a player here that I actually enjoy watching, which is the Bulgarian Bozivar Kraev.
Yep.
He's very good. He's in the midfield. He's got that flashy, that David Luiz type of hair. But he's a decent player. I enjoyed him when he played against Benfica. Also, Hugo Vieira, which was a player that had success with them, then moved on. I think at one point he was with Benfica. He had a tragedy happen in his life. His girlfriend succumbed to cancer, and then kind of took a step back in his career as a result of that tragedy. But he's back. He's still a guy that has talent. Sandro Lima is another guy. There's a couple of guys on here that are decent players that could probably feature in some other teams, some of the top table teams.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've noticed here that this is the first team that we've looked through so far that has a player with double-digit goals, with Sandro Lima having 10 goals this season.
Yeah, he's been excellent.
Like that's the thing that surprises me the most with this team is that they're able to score goals.
Yeah.
25 goals in the league so far. I guess like they're conceding too many, but you can't really ask too much for a team that's been promoted from the third division to the top division. So.
Yeah, it's just the style that Vitor Oliveira plays.
Yeah.
It's attractive. It's open. It's a style that you create chances, and when you have guys that can put them away, you find yourselves this late in the season in a very comfortable position.
All right, in 9th place we have Santa Clara, this team from the Ilha de São Miguel, with 30 points. Now this team has a little. I don't know if you can tell, but this team has a sentimental feeling. I have a sentimental place in my heart right now. I don't know what for, but I enjoy watching this team succeed for what they are. Just a small team from the biggest island in the Azores, which isn't really that big. Very, very fun stuff to see.
Oh, you got the Azorean flag behind you, so that explains why you have a soft spot. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this team has been a surprise this season, and this team actually opted to play in the continent, play all the rest of the games, their home games in the continent. They're going to be playing at the Federation's complex they call the football city, Cidade Futebol. So they're going to be playing there. But you got some names here that you may recognize. Rafael Ramos played for Orlando for quite a few years. I also played in Chicago. He's a Benfica product. Ukra is a guy that came from Porto ranks, and if you follow him on Instagram, he's a guy that has a very, very funny Instagram. Diogo Solomon, he was brought up in Sporting. So there's quite a few players here that are very decent. A young squad. Fabio Cardoso at the center of defense is also a Benfica product. Cesar Martins, Benfica product. So you got in a starting defensive line, you have three players that have all played at Benfica at some point. Both Ramos and Cardoso were brought up at a very young age there.
And their schedule, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, the second game they've got, not the second game. Well, they've got Benfica left. They've got, Sporting left to play. They've got, I don't know, a bit of a mixed bag as well because they also have, option stuff. So it's about can they, find that extra gear against the big sides so that they can get into the top half of the table and stay there. I think that should be their goal, and I think they're, well on track to do that. It's just how do they come into it?
Yeah, they got a very tough game right to start against Braga in Lisbon. Braga, who you guys may know, lost their coach to Sporting, and the coach that took over, Custodio, doesn't really have senior team experience. So I'll be curious to see how this Braga can perform against Santa Clara and also for the rest of the season. And I know that we'll get to Braga in a minute, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
All right. So up next, we have in 8th place Muriense, and they have 30 points. This Muriense team, it's another one of those. This midfield is very equal. Like 10th to about 6th or it's about 7th place is really tight. Like you have a very good pack of teams here. This team, again, there's another team with another player with at least 10 goals with Fabio Abreu, a very good player from Angola. But other than that, they're just another solid squad in the midfield of Portugal. This team has had success recently, winning the Taça da Liga in 2016-2017. So I think right now they're just slowly trying to build a foundation to try and push harder,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Steven Vitória, he's a Canadian, played at Benfica, played at Estoril. Rafika Alish also has Benfica connections, even though he was under contract for Benfica, but he's never played 1 minute for Benfica. He ended up at Nacional. Now he's at Moreirense. But Javan was another guy that Benfica bought and ended up elsewhere. A couple guys here that stand out, but overall, I think their consistency is probably what's gotten them this far. 7 wins, 9 ties, 8 defeats, 34 goals scored. I mean, consistent, really. Nothing too flashy and nothing too poor.
All right, in 7th place, we had the team that had one of the hardest starts I've seen in the Portuguese league out of the top 3 I've seen in a long time. We have Famalicão, and they're a newly promoted team, may I add, with 37 points. Now this team started off very hot, and then they met their bump in the road, which was Port. And since then, they weren't able to maintain the winning ways.
Yeah. Look, I agree with you, man. This was the Cinderella season for the first quarter. The Cinderella team for the first quarter of the season was this Famalicão team. They were consistent. They were well coached. They have a good team. And I just wonder if they ended up running out of steam at the point that the league was interrupted, because oftentimes these little teams, they're under a lot of pressure. Not only there's physical pressure, obviously with stamina problems and all that, but when you are up there on the table, there's a lot of pressure for you to perform week in, week out. And sometimes teams that are not equipped for that you have younger players, they really don't know how to adapt to that new reality for them as a team that was a Cinderella team. I wish they were still up there, but I think they have to be pleased with what they've done this season so far.
And they really had all of our attentions at the beginning of the year, because at the beginning of the year, they had decent competition. Santa Clara to start, then Rio Ave, Vitória, Aves, Fosters. And then they did what we needed them to do. And it was beat Sporting away. So they beat Sporting in the Avelldad. I can't say it. Avelldad, yeah. And that's when the hype hit the peak. Like, all right, this might mean they're big time. And then 2 games later, they lose 3-0 to Port in the Dragão. And then after that, they win and draw, and then they've just been inconsistent from then.
Yeah.
They're still in the mix, though. I mean, there's only 1 point between them and Rio Ave in 5th. So I think, if they have Braga right in the first week. So, I mean, that's not going to be an easy game by any stretch. But after that, I think, there's a chance that they could pick up, some more points and I think finish the season at least on a high.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think
they got Porto in the first week.
I was about to say that. They got Porto instead. That's even worse.
This is one of the teams that I was most interested to talk about, because they have one of the most, the most strange squads I've ever seen in my life. They have so many players that were transferred from top 5 well-known teams, in the top 5 leagues, that are just offloading all these young players, and the likes of Atletico, Wolverhampton Wanderers, Nice, Valencia, and then they have players from Benfica, Braga, West Ham. It's just incredible seeing this team. They have so many players from these large clubs, and to me, it's no surprise that they get promoted, stun a lot of people, and are now in the upper half of the table with these players. Because I was talking about this before the recording started, when these bigger teams let their players go to these, smaller clubs and get playtime, you often see the best out of them. And if somehow this coach can wrangle a group of players from 10 different leagues, 15 different nations, and create a cohesive group that can win games, I mean, no wonder this team is kind of inspirational for fans of the league, because it's how is this even possible? One name that sticks out to me is Fabio Martins, the winger, played for Braga, featured in the Europa League a lot.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I feel like that was their best. That was their best thing they could have done.
That's a big signing. I mean, if you can get a player with European experience who's still relatively young to help these really young players get used to the league and create a string of success. I mean, they've claimed some scalps this league season so far, and I'm not surprised at all by that. They have players in here with big potential that are out on loan from huge clubs and that are taking their chance and probably catching the eye of their home club, wherever they're on loan from. Or
no, look, you bring up a great point.
Trial.
Yeah, you bring up a great point on these young players. But there's some money behind this team. There's foreign investment behind this team. But when you look at Diogo Gonçalves, for example, a standout for them this season. He is a Benfica product. He's on loan there. Ruben Lameiras.
I've heard that name in previous years.
Yeah, Ruben Lameiras is another one. So these are all guys, and Diogo Gonçalves, I believe, was playing in championship last season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe for Nottingham Forest.
Right. So I mean, and like you said, Fabio Martins, who was a standout. I believe he was at Gil Vicente before Braga, and then he got. But I remember a goal that he scored against Sporting that, like a shot from the outside that I was really, really impressed with. But I mean, Google Rodrigues is another guy that has made a permanent move from Benfica to there. Rodrigo Miranda, which Benfica fans don't hold in the highest regards. But he's another solid player that spent some time in Turkey last season, finally rehomed to Portugal, and he's now playing at Famalicão. But this is a team that definitely very interesting in the way that that they've been able to wrestle up these players from all these clubs, these young kids that are basically, as I mentioned before, are playing with no pressure. And they all have embraced this opportunity as a stepping stone or some kind of evolution within their career to get to where they really want. But this team has really surprised me, and I enjoy watching them, and I think that João Pedro Sousa, as the coach, has done a very good job in coaching them.
Yeah, and just going back to Fabio Martins, I feel like getting him was probably the best thing they could have done. Because Fabio Martins, he's had experience at Braga being a bench player and coming in being a good player for Braga too. And him being loaned out to Famalicão has allowed another fan favorite. Everywhere he goes, he's a fan favorite. He comes to Famalicão, he scores goals for him, and he's a leader. He's a team leader. I feel like he leads by example, and he's also very good with his words too. So yeah. I feel like that was probably the most important thing they've done during that offseason when they got him.
Yeah, and when you have that many young players, you kind of need a little bit of a senior guy that's been through the paces and knows how to control the locker room.
Absolutely. All right. Now going to the top 6, we have Vitória de Guimarães with 37 points, tied with Famalicão. Now, Guimarães are known as one of the bigger teams in Portugal, even though they haven't really won that much. They've won a couple Taça Portugals, but that's pretty much it. They have a very rowdy fan base, which is a thing I think that really helped them play was having a good stadium, very good ultras at the stadium.
Yeah, they've had some encounters with the Braga fans, and it's been ugly. But yeah, this Vitória de Guimarães is a historical club in Portugal. They've probably top 5 best teams in Portugal, if not in history, definitely in recent history. They burned through the Europa League qualifiers with 5 wins and 1 tie. When they got to the group stage, that's when they pooped the bed. 1 win, 2 ties, 3 losses. But this is a team that's always, like you said, have a very loyal fan base, and when you play at their stadium, is always difficult. When I look at this roster, Evangelista, André, who else? João Carlos Teixeira, all Pepe Rodrigues, Olajan, Rochinha. I mean, tons of good Leo Bonatini, Marcus Edwards, tons of good players on this team. But it's a very good team, and I think they're performing just like as they'd hoped. But they're probably going to make a hard push to Europe.
Yeah, because
I'd love to talk about Marcus Edwards briefly. That's a name that was in the Tottenham squad when he
massively
was
touted.
17 years old. Everybody was like, "Wow, this kid's going to play for England." Never amounted to anything serious. I think he had a pretty severe injury in his second season that he was in the Tottenham squad. But 17 games, 4 goals, 7 assists, and he's still only 21 years old. He's helping this team reach the upper echelons of the table as a very young player, and is potentially someone who could be one of those young faces of the league that draws people in from other countries to watch this team. So I personally hope that 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 they make a European spot and get onto a platform where people can see the types of players who are playing for this team. Leo Bonatini, some people may be familiar with him. He was in the Portuguese league before, I believe, and was pretty good. Moved to Saudi Arabia, moved to England, was not excellent, and
not very good in the championship.
Not very good in the championship, but could be a player that once again draws attention back to this team as they approach the European spots, and could be really exciting. I'm very excited to see where Marcus Edwards goes from here, because I watched him in his first season. It's just amazing to me that he's putting up great numbers as a young player when, like I said earlier, the goal contribution numbers from a lot of these teams, from pretty much 4th down to 18th, the goal contribution numbers are incredibly low. That's pretty amazing to see a young player putting up 11 direct goal contributions in only 17 games, which weren't even all starts. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes these players that get hyped, well, not hyped, but I'm sure some are hyped within reason. At 16 or 17 years old, there's massive talent there, obviously, that stands him out for the rest of his teammates at that early age. But a lot of it then has to do with the mental aspect of it, right? You got to be able to handle the pressure that's being put on you, the expectations that are being put on you, because I know that England's been looking for one of these young players, and obviously they have those young generations that will have won at the world stage. But when you're a young player, you got to be very careful with the moves that you make, and also the type of advices that you follow, because it's very easy to have a misstep in your career and end up at a place that will bury you. Obviously, injuries could always come into play, but I think that he's kind of found a sweet spot here with Guimarães, and also surrounded by players that are more or less the same age as him, in the early 20s, that are just as talented, if not, more talented than Marcus Edwards. But certainly he's a guy that has a very high ceiling in terms of potential.
Definitely.
One last point on them. Ola John, he's a Benfica favorite, right, Alfredo?
Yeah, Ola John kind of he's been a bit of a polarizing figure for Benfica fans. I think that Benfica fans are actually glad that he's gone. He came to Benfica through a third-party fund, but never amounted to anything. He had some flashes here and there, but nothing consistent. Then I think he's went back to the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken, and now he's back in Portugal, and he does feature a little bit for this Guimarães team. But
a lot was expected of him when he first went to Benfica. There was a lot of hype surrounding him, and
because
just really didn't amount to anything.
Yeah, he was part of a very talented Dutch generation. He was one of the standout players, and he really never amounted to anything. And Benfica invested on him, and as it turned out, it didn't pan out.
All right, now moving up in 5th place, we have a bit of a surprise. We have Rio Ave up here with 38 points. Now, Rio Ave, they're usually a good team. I've always respected Rio Ave. They have good fans, nothing amazing, but this year their coach has really pushed them. Carlos Carvalhal has really pushed them to be something better. It's really paying out for him.
Yeah, no, Carlos Carvalhal is definitely a very good coach. We saw him coach at the championship, but also there's quite a chock full of talent here. I can think of one player, and I'm trying to find him.
Gelson Dahl is in this team.
Yeah, Gelson Dahl.
They've got Carlos Mane as well.
Carlos Mane. That's Nuno Santos is the one guy that was sent to them from Benfica, and I think he's permanent there. But he has just had the massive season this year for them. But Felipe Augusto is also a guy that was at one point connected to Benfica. Tarantini, who is a veteran, that's the one captain in that middle of the field that kind of controls everything. But they have a very good team, and Carvalhal, he plays a very attractive style, and I think that a lot of the success can be owed to him. But when you have this set of players to play with or to set up, then it kind of makes things easier for you. And they've been consistent this season.
Yeah, and they're no slouch to any of the big three. Like you go back to the beginning of the season when they beat they beat Sporting 3-2 on 3 penalties, which was very funny to see. They only lost the fourth 1-0. Like they get close games against these big three opponents, and they last left off drawing a Porto actually.
Yeah, no, I know the Benfica game was very close.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it was a 3-2 Benfica win for the Taça Portugal.
Yeah, Benfica inched that out.
Yeah. So this team, it's no slouch over, which is actually very good for Gewab. They've really done a good job this year. It's whether or not they can maintain it going into next year. That's the real question for them.
Yeah.
All right. Now moving up into the top 4, this is where it gets interesting. We have in 4th place we have Sporting with 42 points. Now, Sporting. They've had a rough few years now, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely.
With the whole fan attack thing, issues with the ownership. I mean, it's not been pretty there at all.
I mean, even today, not today, but present day, there's a lot of conflict from the fans and the guy that's in front of the team or in front of the club, the president. He wasn't the consensual choice by many of the fans. Bruno Carvalho was the opposition, but we all know what happened to Bruno Carvalho. And this is a team that's kind of been in disarray, as you mentioned, the past couple of seasons with the invasion to the academy, some of the on-the-field shenanigans with throwing, fireballs at their own goalkeeper in their own stadium. But this is a team that seems to have gotten a new lease on life with the appointment of Ruben Amorim, who was at Braga. They paid a very high fee for him. I think it was in the double digits, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe it was 10 million.
Right. So I'll be curious to see what Ruben Amorim is able to do with this team. Certainly, I don't know if first place is reachable. I think he's 18 points from first.
Yeah.
But certainly he could be a guy that could play spoiler to a lot. I know that they played Benfica in the last round, but I'm curious to see what Ruben Amorim is going to bring to this team. And I think the one advantage that Sporting has is when a team usually changes coaches, the ideologies of the new coaches and the methods and the style of play and the gameplay, it takes time to assimilate all of those things. But the fact that they're basically having a mini preseason is given Ruben Amorim to work the team to his image, to his ideas, to his style. So I'm curious to see what happens with this Sporting team for the next 10 rounds. There's also some very exciting new players that have been talked about in the media. So I'm curious to see what the Sporting is going to be able to do. And obviously, with Ruben Amorim being a Benfiquista and having played at Benfica, obviously I don't want him to win any games for Sporting. But certainly behind closed doors, I'll root for him to be successful, albeit not too successful.
Yeah, the Benfica fan in me sees that Sporting still have an empty trophy case in their museum, and I want it to stay like that. But on the other hand, I do want to see Amorim succeed with a big team, because at Braga he did some unbelievable things. For the few games that he coached, he did a very good job. So I want to see what they can do.
Yeah, and look, one thing is to coach at Braga where the expectations, albeit high, but they're not Sporting Porto or Benfica expectations, right? Because
Right.
those teams, when they enter the season, the objective is to win a championship, to win the Taça de Portugal, to win the League Cup, to do well, to place in Europe. All these expectations and the fan base that comes with it, not only the fan base, but also the media coverage that comes with it, is something that could sometimes influence a coach. And if you're not prepared to handle it, and we're talking about Ruben Amorim, who's had a very little senior experience, if you're not prepared to handle that media pressure and that media attention, it might be something to work against you. But I'm very curious to see what the Sporting team is going to do for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Now, actually, staying with Sporting, they recently just sold Bruno Fernandes to, of course, Manchester United, and I feel like this almost helps them in a way, because this is more than just me being a Benfica fan. I've always thought that Bruno Fernandes has been a fantastic player, but he's not the leader that they need. I feel like he's always dragged them down when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, I kind of have a theory that it's not along the same lines, but it's somewhat similar, right? Um, I think that they had the opportunity to sell Bruno Fernandes in the beginning of the season.
Yeah,
If they
absolutely.
sell Bruno Fernandes in the beginning of the season, they pocket 30 million, whatever it was that they were asking for. With those 30 million, you could have gone and gotten a few guys here and there, a few just to fill up some gaps. Instead, you keep Fernandes. You don't go into the market, or you don't make any significant forays into the market because you really don't have the capital or the money to invest. And as a result, you kind of leave Bruno Fernandes to fend for himself with this team, really surrounded by kind of mediocre players. They went and got Jesse from Real Madrid or whatever it was. But apparently the guy likes music more than he likes football. So it really didn't pan out. Vieiro has had a tough time adapting to Sporting. So
you couple that with the loss of Bas Dost back to Frankfurt, and
yeah,
I mean, where are the goals coming from? And it's just kind of Fernandes like trying to string it together. I think with the loss of him and the amount of money that they have, they can start to rebuild and build a more complete side, I think.
Well, yeah, that was the whole thing, because they had to sell Bas Dost because they didn't really have any money. And then after the whole thing with the academy happened and losing players such as William Carvalho, such as Rui Patricio, without having money come in to your coffers as a result of those as a result of a sale that could have been with those players, rather than leaving on their own accord and breaking their contract because of the circumstances. You also Rafael Leão, who's at Milan now. Those are all players that they missed out on sales. So they were kind of left with no money. They were able to get Sporar in the winter window, but he has yet to prove himself. But apparently, he's probably going to be the number one choice at forward for them.
Yeah, Sporar really showed his magic in the Europa League, if I'm not mistaken. He really did something there.
Yeah.
He scored a hat trick, if I'm not mistaken, or it was. I remember he scored two at least. I forgot which, but no, Sporting really need to push more into the future. Their last title win was in 2002 or 2001, or either 2001 or 2002. And it's been a long time. Yeah, and just like I said before, they have a empty trophy case in their museum that they've been wanting to fill for so long. Like, you think I'm joking? There's an actual trophy case that's sitting there that's empty. It's memes all the time by Benfica fans and in Porto fans all the time.
See, I've just always had like a admiration for this club because two of Manchester United, the club I support, two of their most exciting players that they ever signed in the past 20 years were straight out of Sporting's academy. And there's always been this reputation around Sporting about their academy, about how they seem to produce players very regularly that go on to have great careers outside of the league. And now it just seems to be this sort of parking lot for washed up forwards. Like all these forwards who can't seem to produce for their clubs end up at Sporting and have these amazing resurgences, and then Sporting sells these players on, and they have to replace them with a new forward who needs a goal boost. Like it happened with Islam Slimani, it happened with Bas Doss, and now they have Luciano Vieto, who was this amazing talent at Villarreal, went to Atletico, didn't pan out at all, and is now struggling at Liga Nos, at the Liga Nos level. I could see him having a insane resurgence next year, because that just seems to be what happens. But seeing a player like Hesse or a player like Yannick Bolasie go to Sporting is just strange to me, because a player like Jeremy Mathieu, winning the Champions League with Barcelona and then sort of fading out of relevance and ending up at Sporting. They're a team made up of all these very recognizable names, and yet they just can't produce the amount of success that seemingly Porto and Benfica have been able to achieve for the past 15 plus years. Yeah. It's just like, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And a lot of that has to do because the house is not clean.
Yeah.
If I could use that, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the background that goes on that it ends up affecting the team. And yes, you were correct. Sporting is a world-known academy, and they've produced a lot of talent, a lot of world-class talent. But ever since they've had some issues, they've kind of taken a step back. The other thing is that when you have these young players breaking in with tremendous potential, breaking into the main team, but the team doesn't correspond to or kind of cater to that level of talent, or kind of encourage that level of talent, or even nurture that level of talent, these kids end up getting lost in a shuffle, because if the team is not successful, they don't have the visibility that the Porto or Benfica team would have when they're playing young players. I mean, you have players here that have been basically come out of this academy that has just gone to waste. Some guys, what is it? Mateus Pereira? Who's the kid that's playing for Albion with Krovinovic?
Pereira.
Yeah.
So that kid is having a career year. And look where he ended up, right? He has the level of talent to play for a better team, but he ended up in a championship, and he's absolutely tearing it up there. But he's had this resurgence as a result of leaving Sporting.
I think for that exact reason, Rafael Leao had to leave. There was no path for him to grow as a player unless he left that, because it's seemingly he was lost in this constant bringing in of new strikers.
Yeah.
They were just constantly bringing in a new striker, and everybody was onto this kid as being like this amazing talent. And, he went to Lille, was great, went in a sort of strange deal to Milan, and is now fighting for his place in a team that's fighting for a European spot in the top 5 league. I don't think that ever would have been possible.
And the other thing is that the talent that these kids have, the asking price that Sporting wants is comparable to what Benfica and Porto want for their young talents, right? Yeah. But when your team is not doing that well, it's very hard to convince a team to come and grab this player, because there's talent here. I mean, look at Bruno Fernandes. If United knew today, or knew during the winter, well, not during the winter, but during the summer transfer window, if they knew what they know today about Bruno Fernandes, they would have paid double to have Bruno Fernandes. But that's the type that you have a mediocre team, right? And you have a player that has talent, but he comes out as the result of not having talent around him. So is this guy for real, or is this guy, in the land of the blind, the guy with the one eye is king, right? So is this just the result of being surrounded by mediocre players and you stand out so much easier, or are you really that talented? And I think that's the reason why Manchester United took such a long time to pull the trigger on Bruno Fernandes, is not only because the price that Sporting was asking for, but also they weren't really sure of what his qualities were going to be at United. And now, fast forward 3, 4, 5 months that he's been at the club. I think it's 4 months that he's been at the club. 5 months that he's been at the club. Now Manchester United obviously knows what they have, but it's very hard sometimes to pay for the asking price when the quality in the team is not there, and it's very hard to judge a player's potential.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, now moving into the top 3, we have Braga with 46 points. Now, Braga is another one of the big teams in Portugal. Very good fan base. And in my opinion, they probably have the best stadium in the league. I love that stadium so much. Right in the middle of a quarry. A quarry. Yeah. It's amazing. But this team, they have coming off of them selling their manager, of course, or Amorim, sorry. And so now we don't really know what they're going to be doing, because their coach now, Castro, he hasn't had, just like Alfredo said before, he hasn't really had that much top first team experience with any team for that fact.
Yeah, no, look, this Braga team is an interesting story, right? Because they went and they qualified for the Europa League, and their qualifying campaign, 4 games, 4 wins. Then they went to the group stages, 4 wins, 2 ties, and 2 losses. And I think they might have gone to the semis, if I'm not mistaken. But this is a team that started the year with Sá Pinto as the coach. And domestically, they did really, really poor in the first 5-6 games of the season. They were doing excellent in Europe, but domestically, they weren't doing well. Sá Pinto was sacked. Ruben Amorim was brought in, and Ruben Amorim really operated this whole turnaround within the team, and he was the one that set them on the path that they're in. And if they're in the position that they're in right now, they can thank Ruben Amorim for getting them there. But we can't overlook some of the players that they have here. The 2 Horta brothers, João Palhinha, Wilson Eduardo, Rui Fonte, Trincão. Trincão, who, as you guys know, has signed for Barcelona, one of the brightest, talented players for Portugal, is playing for them. And he wasn't even starting with Sá Pinto. It wasn't until Ruben Amorim came along that he started featuring more. But this is a team that is not loaded with superstars, but is loaded with good players. And when you have a coach that emphasizes team play instead of individual talent, then you get the results that you get from this team with Ruben Amorim. So I'm curious to see what Custodio is going to be able to do with this team, because, as I mentioned, no experience, but still the team is there. And I think that he looks at the processes and the game idea that Ruben Amorim had, and I think he's going to stick to that for the rest of the season. And I think that there's a lot of players here with enough experience to be able to see out this season. But it's going to be interesting because it's going to be a shootout between their former coach, who is 2 points behind them, if I'm not mistaken, and his former players. So let's see who finishes in front on that duel.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if I could ask you about Trincão, Because I mean, 6 goals, 3 assists. He's only 20 years old, and in limited minutes, he's looked pretty impressive. He looks pretty comfortable on the ball. But do you think he's ready for that step up now that they've got that agreement with Barcelona? Do you think he's ready to make that step, or do you think that's going to be another case of somebody moving a little too early?
He's extremely talented. It all depends on how he handles it and how Barcelona handles him. With these young players, it's hard sometimes for one of these big sharks to just sit and wait to see what's going to happen with these players, because obviously when you're playing in a Portuguese league, you have more room to develop because the pressure is not as high as a club for Barcelona. Think about how many people he's going to have to compete for a spot with Barcelona day in, day out. At 20 years old, and we look at Barcelona's roster, and you got players in there that are that age, that there's a lot of expectations on them. I think that out of his generation, I think him and Jota are probably the best players to come out of Portugal at their generation. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch the Euro, and they were the two guys that just tore everything up. He's ready. I think he's ready. He's confident. He's technical. He's explosive off the dribble, and he's unpredictable. And when you have a player that's unpredictable and hard to defend against, you're always going to have the edge on your side.
And cross your fingers that Barcelona don't treat him like they treated Quaresma.
Or even Bayern.
Quaresma is a whole different story.
He has his personality. I think that I think that was the difference maker there.
He's a whole different he's a whole different animal.
Quaresma always thought that his skill would get him places. And sometimes your work ethic and how much time you put into training it could really set you up for the future. At the time that both Quaresma and Ronaldo were at the Sporting Academy, Quaresma was definitely the better player of the two. But when you look at Ronaldo and you look at his work ethic and all the training that he does, and that's what really elevated him to the next level that Quaresma can't even touch.
And just one last point on Braga. Their academy is looking very good for the future. There's 3 players in specific that are getting some eyes already. We have Jan Said, Bernard Cote, and David Carmo. They're 3 young guys in their academy right now that are getting some sort of hype already. So, we have, of course, we have, what's his name now? Why am I blanking on his name? Trincao now, but we could have another 3 coming later. So, and Braga, the president for Braga has recently said that he has plans of winning the league in like the year 2022 or something. It was a couple years back he said that. I felt it was a bold statement when he said it now. Then I still think now, but.
Well, he came close. He came close a few years back,
Yeah.
right? So I think that when you look at the top 3 teams in Portugal, you have to start considering Braga also a challenger for the title. And had they not faltered earlier in the season, they probably could be in a better position right now, or they could have been a lot closer to both Benfica and Porto.
And speaking about Benfica and Porto, we'll just talk about these 2 together right now, because if we talk about one, we're going to talk about the other. So in second place, we have Benfica with 59 points. Unbelievable still. I still can't believe it. And in first place, we have Porto with 60. Now, Benfica have blown I believe it was a 7-point lead in this league, just like Porto did last year.
Yeah.
So I feel like this quarantine has come at the best time possible for them. They must be so happy that it happened then, because
Ult the slide.
Yeah, when they last left off, they were not looking good at all. Like, I remember having heart palpitations watching them play. I was in disbelief.
Yeah,
of course, you lose to Braga. You lose to Braga. All right, first of all, you lose to Porto twice in a season already, which I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
They lost to Braga then after, and then they laid a fat egg in the Europa League, and then they drew to Moreirense and Setúbal. And Pizzi missed at least 4 penalties in between the last 2 games that they played.
Yeah. It had not been a good stretch for Benfica before the pause. I think if you look at all 3 or 4 teams, I think Benfica probably is the team that comes out of this pause benefiting the most, because we get a very crucial and important player in Gabriel back. We also had Pizzi and Grimaldo, who had basically played almost every single game for Benfica, who are already showing some of the wear and tear in their legs. So Benfica comes into this pause at a bad moment, but they're going to come out of the pause and look. I hope that they come out strong, but this is a team that has, out of the 3 top teams or 4 top teams, perhaps the most depth in their squad. And when you're playing 10 games in a condensed amount of time, and understanding, and also from what we've seen at the Bundesliga, that there's quite a few injuries that happen as a result of the start of the season. When you have depth and you're able to replace a guy and almost not drop too low of a level as a result of the replacement, then Benfica probably finds himself in a very good position. Now, the biggest thing is how this team starts this league this Thursday, and that's the thing that I'm most curious about, because there were some struggles there that Bruno Lage was having in terms of finding the guys for the right spot. The second forward position was something that was up for grabs. He tried Chiquinho there. Chiquinho is not really his natural position. He's tried other guys there, Rafa there, Tarap. He's tried Tarap there. It really hasn't worked. So I'm hoping that this mini preseason is also giving him some time to work out some of the things that need to be fixed, and also that it has allowed the team to kind of relax a little bit from where they were. And definitely it was almost that somebody threw him a life vest as the team was drowning and seemingly on a downward path as the interruption came. But I think this team just if they're able to squeeze out this their title, they can consider themselves fortunate that they had this pause, I think.
And the most important game for me, for Benfica coming back, is not even in the league. It's in the Taça Portugal. I feel it's against Porto, and we've already lost to them twice already. And to see us lose 3 times to Porto in 1 year, I don't know how I could take it.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing right now. But they also need to try and get back in this league, because if they did exactly what Porto did last year, I'm not going to be happy whatsoever.
It's going to be difficult, because I think my feeling is that whoever loses the championship will win the Portuguese Cup.
Yeah.
So if Porto wins, Benfica will win the Portuguese Cup, and vice versa. Yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this team, to be honest with you. And we were reaching a little bit of an issue. People are questioning Bruno Lage. People are questioning some of the worth of these players. I'm curious to see how this team is going to play without having the pressure of playing in front of a packed house at Estádio da Luz. That's one of the things that I'm looking forward to is seeing, because a lot of these guys, and especially the younger kids, the shirt and being in front of a packed house at Estádio da Luz can sometimes be heavy on you, and you might not play your most natural game because the pressure is so much or so heavy.
And the player that got that the most was
Sorry.
Right? Oh, yeah, the player that got it most was Ferro, the defender for Benfica.
Yeah,
he caught a lot of heat from Benfica fans. And I want to say rightfully so, but at the same time I don't. It was just very unlucky for him.
Yeah.
He had some poor performances. It was just very unlucky for him.
Yeah.
And he really took it to heart. He really loves his team, and the fans really gave it to him. And I remember, I think he was out on social media or a post game interview. He said something that, he said something like, like they expect too much from me or something. It was unfortunate to see that, but guy
Yeah.
who still loves this team. And I think that if he comes back even stronger and shuts up all these Benfiquistas, including myself, I will be so happy for him.
Yeah, the biggest thing with Ferro is the fact that he's a young player, and like I said before, for a young player to be able to play at a high level week in, week out for the whole totality of the season, and we're talking about 40 plus games, is a very big ask from a young player, especially if you haven't had the experience and you're not mentally equipped to be able to handle with the pressure, not only the pressure to compete within the team for your spot and to be able to secure with that spot, but also the pressure that comes from the judgment of the fans, because you make 1, 2, 3 mistakes, you're already being whistled at Stade de Luz. And sometimes it's very hard for a player to handle.
Yep.
Yeah, and particularly in his position. I mean, like you have him and Diaz is expected to be the two key men. We've lost Seth, I think, as the two center backs for Portugal going forward. And as soon as you make 1 or 2 mistakes, particularly at center back, eventually, that's when the fans get on you, and that's when the pressure forces you to crack. So I think if he just lays down a couple of consistent games, gets his form back up, that's what he needs. And I think that's what will get him and Diaz back on the same page.
Yeah, and those two kind of complement themselves pretty well. I've always been I rate Ferro very high. I probably rate him a little higher than Ruben Diaz. Because I feel that he's more technical. He's better with both feet. He's better coming out of the back with the ball at his feet. He doesn't need to use his physicality or his size to win a ball, because I think that his positioning sometimes is very good. Now, Ruben Diaz just brings a totally different aspect to the game. He's physical. He's a presence on the field. Right away, he demands that that the opposing team recognizes where he is on the field, because he just has that demanding presence and also a voice in the back, a leadership voice. But for me, Ferro is a much better player in terms of being technical and being perhaps a more like a silky defender, if you will. Like I don't know if you guys remember Ricardo Carvalho that played at Chelsea for quite some time. He was that type of defender. He wasn't a guy that needed to hit guys or to go in hard and have a fair slight tackle, but come out of the physicality. He was just a guy that with a little toe poke, that's all he needed. And I think that's where Ferro is, despite his height, is a guy that has really nice feet and is a guy that thinks the game is more cerebral in terms of thinking the game. But certainly the pressure of having to play at that high level week in, week out, I think is what got to him. And I hope that this break has also refreshed his mind.
I think as a neutral looking at the top 2 teams in this league right now, I've never been more interested in the squads of these 2 teams, because there's so many familiar faces that were in the Benfica team or in the Porto team that have moved on. Whether it's like Nicolas Gaetan or Salvio have eventually moved on. And even in Manchester United, purchasing Victor Lindelof and Diogo Dalot from these teams, I've had my eye on a lot of these players, and I've never been really more excited by the prospects defensively coming out of these teams. Alex Grimaldo, you mentioned Ruben Diaz, by pretty much every Champions League team that has an aging left back is now looking at this player. And really, I don't think there's a better partner to him than Tecatino Corona right back, because it's like bringing back Danilo to the team, this incredible attacking presence, super exciting to watch. And I guess it was just a shame for me this year seeing that both of them were in the Europa League, whereas in previous seasons, I've seen them go toe-to-toe with some of Europe's best teams, and I understand why. And it might be a little bit of a rebuild now for both of these teams, but I think it would be really devastating if Benfica were to lose someone like Ronaldo or Diaz, because these are younger-ish players who are performing at a really high level, who they're going to get a lot of money for, but it might be difficult to replace. So, these teams, I think the teams in Europe's top 5 leagues always come in for these Portuguese league players, but I think if these, especially these defenses, can stay together in both Porto and Benfica, they can really start building in the attacking lineup, because I don't think in either of those teams the attacking lineup is all that incredibly impressive. It's certainly been better, but they have solid midfields. Gabriel has been excellent. Pizzi, I think, is a world-class player. They can build on these midfields and these defenses if they're able to keep these players. And, if you lose a star like Sporting did when they lost Bruno, an attacking player who's creating and scoring goals for you, that can be replaced. But an entire defensive unit is difficult to replace. So I hope that those two teams can keep those elements of their team together and really push on and return to the Champions League and make it through qualifying if they need to, and, be back in the conversation for having some of the world's best talents in their team. Because I think right now in spots they do. And that's why you saw Joao Felix go for so much last year, because they can attract that international attention. They just need to rebuild these teams and create dominant sides again.
Yeah, and every year we see these teams being ravaged. And I remember Benfica a couple years ago, 4 defenders plus a goalie. I think we lost 4 out of the 5.
Yep.
And the only one that we kept was Grimaldo, because Semedo was gone, Lindelof was gone, Luizão was gone, Ederson was gone, and the only one that was left was Grimaldo. So it speaks to the point that you're saying. So it's a constant struggle that Portuguese teams have, and when I say Portuguese teams, I'm also talking about Dutch teams or any other league that's not the upper echelon of Europe. You're always going to run the risk of losing players or a team being dismantled. And we always hope that with the money that Benfica makes on sales like João Felix, that Benfica is able to keep players. But what are you going to say to a young player who dreams of playing in the Premier League, or dreams of playing in La Liga, or even dreams of playing in the Calcio? What are you going to say? No, you're stuck here. I'll pay you $5 million, whatever they're going to give you, to stay here at Benfica. No, as a young player, you always want to play in the best leagues with the best players. So it's hard. You can only keep those players so long, and I hope that sometimes Benfica could keep them a little longer, but it doesn't happen that way. I think that Ruben Dias is a player that will go this summer. Luis Felipe Vieira, who's the club's president, was on TV this evening in Portugal, and he mentioned, had it not been for this pandemic, you would have sold 2 players for 100 million easy, because he already had offers on the table. But that's the type of club that Benfica is. We're a selling club, unfortunately, like every other club in Portugal. But I think that right now we're producing enough talent at the Seixal that we should be able to keep those players a little longer than we usually do. As a Benfiquista, that's the hope that I have. But I know it's unrealistic to think that you're going to be able to keep Ruben Dias for the rest of his career at Benfica.
And just moving on, so we can get some reps in on Porto, even though I strongly dislike Porto. This team has just been hiding under the radar, and they just pounced when Benfica really hit the downslope. I feel like if they were to win this league, I feel like they would deserve it, of course, because as much as Sergio Conceição runs his mouth as much as he does, he is a good coach, and he has adapted throughout this whole year just to stay up, and now he's in first place. To see what he can do now, I hope that he loses a few games, but you never know. Porto are the masters of scoring 90th minute goals. So I would expect seeing it against Braga the last match week to win the league. Just seems like that year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're able to get back a 7-point deficit, and you're able to finish out and win the league, absolutely, you're gonna deserve it. My biggest thing about Porto, and I'm not gonna question your opinion on Sergio Conceição, but they lost a huge player. They lost Marcano, who was a starting center back for them. He's just really been a standout player in their defense. They've lost him. They've lost him for the season because of a knee injury. And Porto doesn't have the depth that Benfica has. The one thing that Porto's always been able to do, and this is throughout history, is that Porto has a very different culture than Benfica. And a lot of what Porto has adopted in terms of culture is the fact that we're the North, and the North is known as the labor, where all the hard work takes place, while the South is more of the bougie type of folk in Portugal. So they've kind of created this separation within the country, and their whole thing has always been us against the South, us against the South. And with that, that's also allowed Sergio Conceição to really motivate these players based on that. I don't want to say hate, but hate could be used easily. But I'm going to be nice and say dislike of Benfica, dislike of Sporting, and that's what they motivate themselves on. There's a chant every time that Porto plays at home or plays elsewhere. There's always a chant calling out Benfica. Benfica doesn't want anything to do with Porto, but Porto always makes sure that they have a chant that's for Benfica. Obviously, it's not a nice chant, but without Benfica, I don't know if Porto would exist, because so much of their culture has been against the South and against Benfica, who are their rivals from the 80s, from the 90s, from the 2000s. Benfica was always Porto's biggest rival. But I question if they're going to be motivated to finish these last 10 rounds, and if they're going to have a squad with enough depth to be able to finish out this at a very high level. Porto also has a huge cloud over their heads with financial fair play from FIFA. I don't know if FIFA or UEFA rather is going to open any leeway as a result of the pandemic, but Porto has to sell 100 million worth in players in order to meet the financial fair play. And if they don't, then there's a possibility that they probably will miss out on Champions League competition for a couple of years, I think. In the same situation that City's in, I think.
Yeah, it's difficult for them, but they also have the talent to sell. I mean, the likes of Alex Telles, someone who's attracted interest all across Europe. Otavio's looked all right. I mean, he might be able to get something for him. So I think they have sellable assets, but I think one of the reasons that they've run into this difficulty is the way that they buy players versus the way that Benfica buy players or try to raise players through the academy. Because you don't see you see Porto looking towards South America to try and pick up players from there. Rather, Benfica looks to try and bring more players through their academy. So that's where they've run into trouble, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Porto actually has a good generation in the oven. They won the UEFA Youth League, Champions League, last year, I believe.
Yes.
but I think that because of the dire financial situation which Porto is in, they're going to have to sell. And they're probably going to have to sell some of these crown jewels. I mean, you mentioned Alex Telles. I think that there's a good chance that Alex Telles may end up at PSG. But, I mean, you look at Tomáš Stivš, which is their crown jewel right now, which is what they'd consider their João Felix at the time. There's a very good possibility that they may end up selling this kid because they need money, and he's only 18 years old.
I mean, they can always sell Pep, right?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants Pep. Maybe the UFC might want Pep.
Yeah.
All right. So we've been going on for a little bit here. So we'll close out with predictions. We'll just talk about the top two. So I'll go to you first, Alfredo. Who do you think is going to be winning this league this year?
Well, I mean, I would be going against my heart if I had said anything else than Benfica. I think that Benfica has a couple advantages, as I mentioned, and I think because of those advantages, I think that Benfica will come out top.
How about Nick?
I'm actually going to say the same thing. To be honest, looking at the squads, looking at the who's fit and ready to play, I think there's just going to be that extra motivation for Benfica. I don't know. I think just because of the break and the way that they have the time to reset, I think that's what's going to carry them. I think Porto have a chance. I think they could ship a couple goals just before you know it, and that's going to be the difference.
How about you, Seth?
Well, from what I've seen from watching the continuation of the Bundesliga and seeing teams that, to me, didn't look like sides who were going to score a lot of goals and have really just, have depended on their defense to carry their team to victories, players have popped up with goals that you wouldn't expect to, and the strikers that you would expect to be banging in goals have stepped back to allow sort of these squad performances. I think the fact that Benfica has Vinicius up top, who's this striker that nobody really had ever heard of before this season and is, I would say, probably their main attacking threat. I think the rest of their team could contribute more goals, and I think after this break will probably be more motivated to provide performances now that they've let this lead slip and they're down on their luck. They want to arrest that slide. So I would say my prediction is that Benfica will finish top, because this Porto team, I just don't know. If your main attacking threats are your fullbacks and you have 4 strikers in your team who together have scored less than 15 goals, I just don't think it's really going to turn out too pleasantly for them in this last stretch. I just don't see the goals coming from anywhere, whereas I think Benfica has talent all over the place and can really push through this last stretch and win the league.
I'm going to say the same thing, of course. Benfica, more if they need to win than they will win. They really do need to win, not for their sake, but for my sake. If they lose this, it's going to be game over for me. I don't know what's going to happen. But they just have more depth everywhere. Port have a good team when they're fit, but when I feel like when players start getting hurt or they're not in form, they're gonna really lack in that department. So I'll say Benfica, but I do think it'll be very close. It comes down probably to the last 2 games.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, but it's funny that you mentioned Vinicius, right? Because Benfica got Diogo Souza, who is Brazilian, was at Braga, ended up in China, brought him in the winter transfer window. I'm wondering now with both players going through this mini preseason, if they will have a clean slate, and Lage will pick whoever's he feels is in the best period of form, or if he'll continue going with Vinicius.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're both very similar, right? They're both sort of large strikers.
Yeah, they're box guys.
Yeah.
Vinicius has a little bit more power and physicality. Souza might have a little bit more feet and better head game.
But all right, that was a very nice long episode. I could keep on talking about the Portuguese league all day, but we've been going for a little bit here. So I want to thank you, Alfredo, for coming on. This was actually a very big surprise. Like I didn't really think you actually would come on, but because I've been listening to the Benfica podcast for a long time now, and just hearing your voice talking to me, I'm like, it's kind of crazy. So
Hey, man. I appreciate the invite, and sorry if I monopolized the time on the show.
Oh no, you're okay.
Oh no, you're the expert.
You're the expert.
But when you get me talking about Portuguese football and Benfica, especially Benfica, I could get lost in that. And again, thanks, man. Thanks for the invitation. It was a pleasure being here with you guys.
Do you have any plugs you want to put in there?
No, man. It's just if you don't know Benfica Podcast by now, you should. I know it's more Benfica driven. Every week, benficapodcast.com is where you can find us. Every week we've been going on. Next season will be our 12th season. We've been going on since 2012. We were the original Benfica podcast. So we've been going on for quite a bit. We just crossed episode 365. So it's a labor of love, man. And I know that you guys are just getting started, but as long as you have passion for what you guys are doing, and you continue doing it, and you don't do it because you're interested in views or likes or following, just stick with it, man. And you guys will have a good thing.
All right. Well, thank you.
Man.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for watching this episode of the Sports Life Network Soccer Report. I've been Rob, Nick.
Have a good time, everybody. Enjoy the enjoy the football.
And Seth.
I'm ready, man. I took the day off.
Great to make my debut on here. It was a lot of fun.
All right, people. If you like what you saw, leave a like, subscribe. Tell us what you think down below. Who do you think is going to win the Portuguese League? I've been Rob. We'll see you later.